The warm summer sun had barely climbed above the old maple trees when a simple accident inside a dusty pantry forced two lifelong friends to confront a truth that years of laughter, silence, fear, and sacrifice had carefully hidden. Neither of them expected that a rusty lock on an old wooden door would become the turning point that changed both of their lives forever. What began as an ordinary family gathering in a quiet countryside home slowly unfolded into one unforgettable afternoon that proved the strongest walls are never built from bricks, they are built from unspoken feelings, painful memories, and the fear of losing the person who matters most. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support helps us continue bringing heartfelt stories that remind us hope can be found in the most unexpected places. Rowan Mercer had always believed that life rewarded people who stayed patient. At 28, he had learned to carry disappointments quietly. His father had passed away when he was still a teenager, leaving him to help his mother raise his younger brother while working every job he could find. Dreams of college slowly disappeared beneath bills, responsibilities, and endless overtime shifts. Yet despite everything life had taken from him, Rowan never became bitter. Friends often admired how easily he smiled, even when exhaustion covered his face. Among all those friends, no one understood him better than Coralie Bennett. Coralie had entered Rowan's life during middle school after transferring from another town. She had been shy, awkward, and painfully quiet after losing her mother to illness. While everyone else saw an anxious girl who barely spoke, Rowan noticed someone trying desperately to belong somewhere. A simple act of sharing his lunch during recess became the beginning of a friendship that quietly survived every season of life. Through graduation, first jobs, heartbreaks, financial struggles, and family responsibilities, they remained each other's safest place. Years passed, and everyone around them assumed they would eventually become a couple. Ironically, that assumption kept them apart. Rowan feared ruining the only friendship that had remained constant through every storm. Coralie convinced herself that Rowan deserved someone brighter, more successful, and less burdened by anxiety than she believed herself to be. So both continued pretending their bond was nothing more than lifelong friendship. On a bright Saturday morning, Coralie invited Rowan to her Aunt Meredith's farmhouse several hours outside the city. Every summer the Bennett family gathered there to celebrate the beginning of harvest season. It was an old tradition filled with homemade pies, laughter, faded family photographs, children racing through gardens, and neighbors who treated everyone like relatives. Rowan accepted immediately. After months of constant work at the local construction company, a peaceful day in the countryside sounded like exactly what he needed. The farmhouse looked untouched by time. White wooden fences surrounded colorful flower gardens while climbing roses stretched across the porch railings. Wind carried the scent of fresh bread, lavender, and sun-warmed grass. Chickens wandered freely across the yard, and old wind chimes sang softly beneath the porch roof. It felt less like visiting a house and more like stepping inside a treasured childhood memory. Coralie seemed different there. Her shoulders relaxed. Her smile appeared lighter. She laughed more often than Rowan had seen in months. Watching her help elderly relatives prepare lunch reminded him how naturally she cared for everyone around her. She remembered every cousin's favorite dessert, every aunt's birthday, and every uncle's health concerns. She gave pieces of herself to everyone without expecting anything in return. After lunch, Aunt Meredith asked the two of them to bring extra jars of homemade jam from the old pantry behind the kitchen. The pantry had existed longer than the farmhouse itself. Built almost entirely from oak, it remained cool even during the hottest afternoons. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with preserved vegetables, pickled fruits, flour sacks, spices, candles, and carefully labeled jars collected over decades. Neither Rowan nor Coralie thought twice before stepping inside. The heavy wooden door closed behind them with a loud thud. Seconds later came the sharp metallic click. Rowan reached for the handle. It refused to move. At first they laughed, assuming someone outside was teasing them. Rowan knocked politely before pushing harder. Nothing happened. He called for help, but cheerful music and loud conversations from the backyard celebration swallowed every sound. The walls were thick, built decades before modern insulation existed. Minutes slowly stretched into nearly an hour. Sunlight entered only through a tiny window near the ceiling, casting long golden beams across floating dust particles. The air smelled of cinnamon, apples, and aged wood. It should have been comforting, yet the growing realization that nobody could hear them slowly replaced amusement with quiet concern. Rowan searched every corner for another exit while Coralie sat against stacked flour sacks, trying to remain calm. She had never liked enclosed spaces. Even as children, elevators and crowded closets made her uneasy. Rowan noticed her breathing becoming shorter. Without saying much, he simply sat beside her, reminding her to focus on slow breaths just as she had once taught him during one of his panic-filled nights after losing his father. Time softened their frustration. With nowhere else to go, silence gradually invited honesty. The pantry became strangely peaceful. Outside, distant laughter floated faintly through old walls while inside only the gentle ticking of an antique clock could be heard. Rowan realized they had spent years talking about work, family, responsibilities, and daily routines without ever discussing themselves. Somewhere between adulthood and survival, they had forgotten how to share the feelings buried beneath ordinary conversations. Coralie stared toward the small window where sunlight painted bright patterns across dusty shelves. She admitted that lately she had been feeling lost. Everyone around her seemed to be building families, advancing careers, and achieving dreams while she felt frozen in place. Every promotion she declined had been because she feared leaving behind relatives who depended on her. Every opportunity that appeared somehow slipped away because someone else needed her more. Rowan listened carefully without interrupting. He understood that feeling better than anyone. He confessed that sometimes he wondered whether kindness quietly robbed people of their own future. He had spent years helping everyone else solve problems until one morning he realized he no longer recognized the young man who once dreamed of becoming an architect. Bills had replaced blueprints. Responsibility had replaced ambition. Yet neither regretted helping others. They only wondered whether there was still time left to choose happiness for themselves. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the room. Hours seemed to disappear inside conversations neither had realized they desperately needed. They laughed about childhood mistakes, remembered embarrassing school memories, recalled late-night road trips after graduation, and spoke about people they had loved and lost. Every memory carried invisible proof that throughout every chapter of life, the other had always been present. Only then did Rowan notice something remarkable. Whenever Coralie described her happiest memories, he was standing somewhere inside every single one. She noticed the same truth about him. Neither mentioned it immediately. The realization settled quietly between them, gentle as sunlight resting across old wooden floors. For the first time in years, neither felt rushed by work schedules, phone notifications, or endless responsibilities. Locked inside that forgotten pantry, they experienced something modern life rarely allowed: complete presence. Sometimes life's greatest gift arrives disguised as an inconvenience. As evening slowly approached, footsteps finally echoed somewhere outside. Someone called their names. Relief washed over them both. The old lock had jammed unexpectedly, and relatives had only realized they were missing after searching the property for nearly an hour. With several strong pushes from outside, the swollen wooden door finally burst open. Fresh air poured inside. Family members apologized repeatedly while laughing nervously about the strange accident. Rowan stepped into the fading afternoon sunlight feeling somehow different than when he had entered. So did Coralie. Neither could explain why. The pantry had not changed the world outside. It had quietly changed the world inside their hearts. The drive back toward the city felt unusually peaceful. Golden sunlight stretched across endless fields while distant mountains glowed beneath the setting sun. Neither friend spoke much, but the silence no longer felt empty. It carried understanding instead of uncertainty. Sometimes people spend years searching for happiness in distant places without realizing it has quietly been sitting beside them all along. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with someone who still believes true friendship can become life's greatest blessing, and subscribe to Storyverse for more emotional stories that remind us love often begins with compassion, patience, and unwavering loyalty. The following week felt strangely different for Rowan and Coralie. Nothing dramatic had happened after they left the farmhouse, yet everything seemed to carry a new meaning. The ordinary routines they had shared for years now felt warmer, as if the silence between them had stopped hiding uncertainty and had begun carrying quiet understanding instead. Rowan found himself smiling whenever his phone lit up with Coralie's name, while Coralie no longer hesitated before calling him after a difficult day. They had always been best friends, but now they were finally allowing themselves to appreciate just how deeply they mattered to one another. One bright Saturday morning, Rowan surprised Coralie by inviting her to the city park where they had spent countless afternoons as teenagers. The same old oak tree still stretched its branches across the walking path, and the small lake reflected the clear blue sky just as it had years before. Watching children laugh and families enjoy the sunshine reminded them how quickly life moved and how often people postponed happiness while waiting for the perfect time. They quietly realized that perfect moments rarely arrived on their own. They were created by the courage to be honest. As they walked beside the water, Rowan admitted that the afternoon inside Aunt Meredith's pantry had changed him forever. Being locked away from the noise of the world had forced him to recognize that every meaningful chapter of his life carried Coralie's presence. She had celebrated his victories, comforted him through loss, encouraged him when he wanted to give up, and believed in him long before he believed in himself. He finally understood that the greatest love stories are not always born from dramatic first meetings. Sometimes they grow patiently through years of friendship, loyalty, and unwavering kindness. Coralie's eyes filled with quiet tears, not from sadness but from relief. For so long she had hidden her feelings because she feared losing the friendship that had become her safest place. Hearing Rowan express what she had carried silently for years lifted a weight she never thought she would escape. The fear that had once controlled both of them disappeared, replaced by the comforting certainty that genuine love never asks people to become someone else, it simply encourages them to become the best version of themselves. Months later, Aunt Meredith jokingly placed the old rusty pantry key inside a small glass frame and gave it to them as a gift. She called it the key that unlocked two hearts instead of one old wooden door. It became a treasured reminder that life's unexpected delays, inconveniences, and closed doors sometimes lead us toward blessings we never imagined possible. Rowan and Coralie learned that courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to choose love despite it, and that the strongest relationships are built not on perfect moments, but on years of trust, kindness, patience, and the willingness to finally tell the truth before it is too late.